Okay, welcome everyone to another interview with one of our favorite authors. Today I am with Lindsay Sealey. She is an author of Growing Strong Girls and Rooted, Resilient, and Ready. She is going to be one of the speakers at our Spring Children's Mental Health Symposium. She's an educator, a consultant, and she is the co-founder and CEO of Bold New Girls. So welcome, Lindsay, to the Institute, and
Thank
excited to spend a
you.
few minutes with you here to talk about your work.
Thank you. Me too. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So, why don't you tell me a little bit about what inspired you to write these books and to create your organization, your foundation here? I can see you very much focus on, based on your work, on the empowerment and resiliency of girls. Um, and I'm just curious a little bit about your background and how this came to be.
Sure. Well, I'll start a long time ago now. Wow. I was in a one on one teaching position, and I really noticed early on that as much as I wanted to teach the math or the English or the social studies or whatever was on my agenda, that girls really wanted to, and I'm going to say needed to talk first. And so, just as I think my instincts kicked in and just a habit became, we'll just talk, we'll just connect first. I'll find out how she's doing as a person. Like, who cares about math? And I think through those conversations and that practice, I learned that girls really just wanted to share their feelings and their experiences. And as they processed verbally and also felt they were in a really good company, like someone who's going to listen and not judge them and just really be curious and want to know more about them, that they started to brighten up, to become a little bit more happier, a little bit more confident. And now I know that I was also helping them to self regulate, to calm down and to feel secure and to really get their brain ready for learning. So it was always in that order, talking to the girls, being really interested, finding out what their world was really like and how their day was. And then I could do the learning, and it was just like the perfect pairing. So I got my work done, and they also got to unburden, I call it. And I think I started to notice patterns for sure, that the younger girls were really confident and really secure and really bright and sparkly and bubbly and just full of self-belief and self-love. And that started to change around, the age 8 to age 9. And I was really curious as to why. And I think from those experiences, those conversations, I started to really hone in on, there are some problems here. There are some patterns with girls. And I think I started to get bothered by it. And at the same time, have conversations with parents. And when I left that job and I started Bold New Girls, I think that was really my focus. Like, I want girls to feel empowered in, yes, they're learning, but just in who they are as people. And I wanted to really figure out how I could best help them. And that became Growing Strong Girls, because that was my message. How do we get these girls who I think are so lovely and so delightful really to feel strong and to know that they're strong and to do great things and to show their strength? And after that book then became, I think, the inevitable, which was, what about my teenage daughter? My 8-year-old is now
Yeah.
16, and I think I need more help than when she was 8.
Right.
And that
Well,
became
yeah, and I like myself, I have a 7-year-old and a 13-year-old. So I'm starting where we just posted on our Facebook group yesterday, I believe, that looking at confidence levels in girls and how they're matched with boys until about 8. And I've got my 7-year-old turning 8 next year. And I'm like, oh, good Lord. And we know that there's this 30% gap by the time they're 14 in terms of confidence levels and self-esteem. And I was hoping you could speak to our audience about that, what you've done the research. So what do you think that discrepancy comes from? Because they're not born that way. I could tell you my 7-year-old's just as confident as my 4-year-old is. So, what happens at that, about third
Yeah,
grade, grade 3, you know?
it's really tough to watch, right? Like, I just want to bottle up their like 5-year-old selves and be like, never change. This is the way you need to
Yeah.
be until you're my age. But there's a lot going on, to be honest. So around 8 it's prepubescent. So there's a lot of changes going on in their bodies. So their feelings are changing and their brain is changing. And as the brain develops, and this is different from boys, there's definitely more of a need. Not saying boys don't need to connect, but there's more of a need to connect, to belong, to feel included. And that to them is survival. That is like keeping them, you know, with their group and their people. And I think as they grow and all these changes are going on and new stressors and pressures, they start to have, unfortunately, a social awareness of what other people think about them. And what other people think about them matters so much more than what they think about themselves. Because if they are liked by people, they're included in the group, they get that sense of belonging, their brain feels calm, their brain feels like it can manage all the changes. And so unfortunately that becomes bigger than, you know, being their unique selves and doing their own thing and just being Miss Independent. So there's the physical change and there's the emotional changes that need to connect. And again, there's that awareness that they want to be like everyone else, they want to be accepted by everyone else. And their worst fear is that they're judged by other girls, that they're seen as too different, and that they're going to be rejected. So they change to fit in and they change to survive.
Yeah. And I think that the world has such different expectations for girls. And I know you address this, the social media, especially, I think, of course, like what girls are, you know, socialized to wear and to impress. And there's a lot of pressure on externalized beauty with girls that we don't see in boys in the same way. Doesn't mean there aren't pressures, but the pressures are different.
The pressures are different. And we have to remember they spend a lot more time on their devices. Most boys are not on Instagram and TikTok. They know how to do it and they'll pop in every so often, but it is not their world. You know, girls are looking at 8 and 9 hours a day on their screen. So that's a constant reminder that they're not good enough, that there's very few definitions of beauty, and they're told who they should be, not really given that chance to be who they are.
Yeah, and everything's that has a filter on it too, right?
Everything has a filter.
Everything has a filter.
Everything looks amazing. It's like the highlight reel from everyone. And, you know, we know that and it affects us. So think of a little girl who doesn't know that yet because her brain hasn't fully developed. And she's just thinking, everyone has amazing days. Everyone has an amazing life. Everyone is perfect and polished and beautiful all of the time. None of that is true, but she doesn't know that. And even if we tell her, I think she's not going to believe it. So I think it definitely has gotten more difficult with the rise of the iPhone and social media.
I mean, yeah, this was an issue long before we even had Facebook or Instagram or TikTok.
It was an issue,
right? It was magazines and TV commercials and movie stars.
I was thinking that too. Like I had 17 magazine and I was obsessed with like being Nikki Taylor and these models in the 90s. But I think it just was less in amount because I still had the choice to open up my magazine. And eventually I got bored of my magazine and lived my real life. But now our devices are literally 24/7. So I think we have to look at it's a numbers game. Now we've increased the number and the intensity. So there's that much more pressure, I think, to coming at her with these images and whatnot.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I know raising 2 girls myself, I'm always like, oh, it's feels a little more daunting and uphill once they hit like their tweens versus, you know, my son. I don't nearly worry about him as much at all, in contrast, because the societal expectations are so vastly different, I think.
It intensifies for sure.
Yeah. And so like I'm a mom here with 2 girls. So, and there are many moms watching you who have girls. So if you were to take kind of all the plethora of information you have and somehow give our watchers, our viewers 3 things to really cultivate some grit and resiliency in girls specifically, what are maybe 3 things? You know, I know you probably could give us 100, but 3 if you can.
Yeah, I was thinking, well, just based on what we said, I think the first one that comes to mind, which I see in almost every girl, is this idea of perfect, not necessarily in her looks, but she just wants to be perfect, the pleaser, the, you know, the good girl, to do everything right. And all of these pressures that I know come at her from all different directions from society, you know, to look good and to be successful and to be good at everything, essentially. It's so much. And I think a lot of the girls, unfortunately, that I work with, they don't even try anymore. They actually give up before they try, because if it's not going to be perfect, then why bother? What's the point? And so I like this idea, this phrase really, that's in Growing Strong Girls, of perfectly imperfect, like embracing, you know, the quirks, the weirdness, the mistakes, the failures. Isn't that also important? And I think when we can get girls to embrace all of who they are, and just to almost, I don't want to use this phrase lightly, but the who cares experience. Who cares what I look like today? If I had a bad day, if I made that mistake, just to have a little bit of wiggle room, I guess, in their growth. So the perfectly imperfect, where they're really embracing all of who they are, and they're worrying a little bit less about the outcome and a little bit less about what people think of them. So that's what my heart says, just because I feel like, gosh, there's a lot of pressure and they're so young. So it's too much. And I think we need to also keep in mind they're more and more stressed and anxious every single day. So perfectly imperfect, it's just like that permission. Like, today, I'm just going to be a little messy. My hair's not going to be super coiffed, and that's okay. Little flyaways, don't worry about it. So the perfectly imperfect. The second thing that comes to mind is definitely this idea, like, which I just touched on, of making mistakes. I feel like we raise boys and girls very differently. And I think that when boys make mistakes, we just say, oh, whatever, just keep going, you know, get up, dust yourself off, and on you go, try again. When girls make a mistake, we think, maybe you should just take a little pause, take a little break, let's do something else. But I want girls to actually be making more mistakes, make mistakes over and over again.
I tell my girls that. I said the biggest learning comes from when you screw up. And those when you make a mistake, that's when you learn the most.
That's
So
right.
we want you to make
grow the most.
Yeah.
Like, wow. And this is what I tell girls, and this is maybe for you, Tammy, too. Like, just in mothering and modeling, we have to actually talk about our mistakes. We have to, like, basically normalize it. I'm not saying try to make a mistake, but when we do, like, wow, I made a bad decision, a wrong turn in traffic, or I said the wrong thing, or you know what, I don't think this was the best food choice for our family. This is what I got from it. This is what I'm learning from it. This is how much better I can do tomorrow. And I think those messages are huge. So it's embracing the mistake, but it's just making them. I tell girls all the time, I make probably 100 mistakes a day, but I make mistakes because I'm trying. I am not playing it safe. And that's really my last point. If I could wave my magic wand and over girls and just say, this is what I wish for you girls, I need them to be brave. And that means taking more chances. That means taking more risks. That means being so uncomfortable and doing really hard things that are so scary, because that is when they grow exponentially. And I think that sounds like a lot. So maybe at first,
no, I don't think so at
doing
all.
bravery together, right? Let's do something that we're both scared to do. You do it with her, then you let her try, and you're really close beside her. And then you just watch her start to do scary things on her own. And it's amazing.
Yeah. I mean, with my kids, one of the things that we've said since they were tiny is you can do hard things.
Oh, yeah.
You can do hard things and you can figure this out. And it sometimes takes lots of tears and lots of things. And it was so funny you say this, because yesterday I could hear my 7-year-old downstairs. I was in the bath and I was like, oh, I hear crying downstairs. I was like, oh dear. And my 7-year-old is very sensitive. Like, she's just a very sensitive, kind soul, but she's very easily frustrated. And it was one of the first times I heard her say, I can do hard things and I'm figuring it out. I will tell you if I don't have it. I'm like, okay. No. Versus being like, I'm giving up and I'm not doing this. And I was like, I could still hear the tears, but like, I'm figuring it out. And I'm like, yes. And of course, I would go down and check on her, but she had figured it out. She figured out how to solve it, but that takes time. And I think we sometimes rush kids with this, but if we just keep modeling it and talking, you got to walk the walk yourself as a female. Like, if you're a mom.
Think about how if you had intervened and you had said, oh, no, it's too hard, let me do it. Or, okay, I see you're frustrated. Then she doesn't get that gift of self-confidence. Because we know when we do hard things, like for me, it might be cooking, or it's on anything on the computer. I get so frustrated and I just want to ask for help. But when I figure it out, oh, wow, does that feel good? That feels like $1 million to me. And I think I'm so glad you didn't take that moment from her, because she just learned she can do it. Yeah. She just raised her confidence. And that is resilience. There you go.
Yeah. these
That's
little moments where I'm like, oh, I hear other professionals in my field talking about this, and I hear it, I'm like, yes.
awesome.
You can talk at this all day, but until you start to really, when you
Yeah.
see those seeds being planted and they start to grow, that's like the exciting part of being a parent and watching the research actually pay off. Like you're like, oh, this stuff, these strategies, they work.
They
And
do. Did you ask her about this? Did you say, oh, I heard you say that, and like go back to that moment?
we had a really hard moment in our family after this. So I should ask her what that was
Okay, yeah,
about.
go back. Because I
Yeah.
feel like that's full circle. Like, I heard, can you tell me about this?
Mhm.
Because what you do then is you affirm what she did. Because we don't want it to extinguish, because maybe like for her, she forgot it, or it was just a one-time thing. But to go back to it is like gonna make her sit a little taller
Yeah.
and
And just
do it
like
again.
say, I noticed that. Like I noticed
Oh
you're doing
yes.
these things. Yeah. It's
Tell
just
me what that was like for you.
that's all the good stuff. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Oh, thank you.
We're really excited to have you. It's a month away, so for our conference, and yes, I think you're a wonderful resource for girls in this
Thank you.
world, and we're excited to share. Tomorrow, we're going to be sharing some of your resources with our community. So yes,
Uh-huh.
again, thank you so much, and keep doing
Thanks
what
so
you're
much.
doing, and
Thank you.
just empowering our girls so we have a brand new generation of girls who are confident and we don't see that gap, that
That's right.
30% gap.
We got it. We can do this. We can do hard things,
We can do hard
right?
things, Lindsay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.